Welcome to the channel, guys. For those of you who have been with the channel for a while now, you know that recently I painted my first gen crew cab in my garage. For those of you who are new to the channel, if you haven't yet, you should subscribe to the channel and you should go back and check out those previous videos detailing all the steps of the process I used to paint the truck in my garage. As you know, and as I've said, I don't have experience doing body work and painting a truck, or any vehicle for that matter. And through the process of doing it, I learned a lot that I wish I would have known going into it. This video, I want to tell you guys all about those little things that I learned, so that if you want to take on a project like this or paint a vehicle, then maybe you'll be one step ahead of where you would have been had you not watched this video. Also, near the end of the video, I'm also going to go over all the equipment I used, how much it cost, also all the products that I use and what it costs, so you can know what a budget might look like for a project like this. I won't say that mine turned out absolutely perfect, but I'm very satisfied with the results and I love how it turned out, and I'm impressed that I was able to pull it off on the budget I had and doing it in my garage. If you watch the videos, you know that I did the bed and the cab a little bit differently. So a lot of the stuff I learned came from doing two different kind of processes. So that'll be a lot of where the detail comes on this. So let's get started. So the first thing, when I tore down the cab, you guys noticed I didn't take out the windows. I didn't take out the seals from the windows either. And I'm sure a lot of you wondered if I would regret that in the end. And my honest opinion is I don't regret it at all. I think that was the way to go. So in that process, I used a couple different methods to make sure I got the paint to lay under the seal on the metal. I used a 3M product that was a special tape to lift the seal off of the metal so that I could have access to that metal. I also did that same technique using some cheap playing cards. And in the end, looking back on it, it was much better to use the playing cards. Not just from a cost standpoint, but also I feel like they did a better job of holding the seal up and not actually popping out and creating a headache. Also, for the larger seals on the front windshield and the rear window, I used what's called the rope technique. This technique involved pressing a rope in under the seal to lift the seal up off of the metal. Again, this was an amazing little tip that someone gave me, and it worked really, really well on those larger seals that had a lot of seal to lift up off the metal. Now let's talk about the sanding process. On the bed, I sanded it all the way down to bare metal, and on the cab, I did not. In retrospect, sanding down to bare metal was probably one of the biggest things I did that I wish I would have done on the cab as well. Getting it down to a clean slate allowed me to see all the imperfections in the metal, and it also took out all the lines from the previous paint. Big key here is just sand it down to bare metal. Do what you have to do to get it to bare metal. Once you're at bare metal, do as much body work as you need to. I've talked to you guys in many videos before. Remember, get the low spots up as good as you can. Get the high spots down below what you would consider level, and use body filler to do the rest. Remember, those low spots, you should try and get them to within 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch deep at most. You don't want a huge thing of body filler filling up a huge dent. That's just not the right way to do it. So get your hammer and dolly out and use those to try and get those low spots up as close to level as you can. After you do that body work on the bare metal, now it's time to spray some primer surfacer. And all this is a layer of primer that basically protects the metal from any oxygen, water, or other contaminants, so you can move on to the next steps. You don't want your body part sitting in bare metal for a very long time, or it may start to rust or oxidize or get dirty. After you spray on that primer surfacer, do some block sanding. Now with the block sanding, make sure you use a guide coat first. You can use an aerosol coat or a dry coat, and then start with 150, move to 220, and then move to 320 sandpaper. Make sure every grit of sandpaper is taking out the scratches of the previous grit. That's one thing I learned for sure, especially on the cab, is that if you hope that the paint just fills up some of those sanding scratches when you paint it, it's not going to magically happen. You have to use those grits sequentially to take care of the sanding scratches so that it appears very smooth. Another difference I did between the bed and the cab, with the bed, I sprayed it with sealer at this point. Once the sealer was dried and cured, I wet sanded it with 500 grit. But as you recall, I didn't paint it right away, and that's why I sprayed it with sealer early on, so that it could be ready, and then when I was ready to paint, I could just paint it. Now on the cab, I did all the body work and primed it and block sanded it, and I sprayed the sealer right before I sprayed the base coat. The difference in these two methods is trying to create either a chemical or a mechanical bond. If you spray the sealer, let it cure, and wet sand it, you're really hoping on getting a good mechanical bond between the base coat and the sealer. Now if you spray the sealer and then spray the base coat right after it flashes, you're getting a chemical bond. The method that I preferred was actually to spray the sealer, let it cure, wet sand it, and then spray the paint later on. And the reason I like that is because once I sprayed the sealer and wet sanded it, it really let me know where some of the little tiny imperfections were that I didn't catch otherwise. Now when I sprayed the sealer and went directly to the base coat, I didn't have time to fix those imperfections. Now a few things that I did well that I want to tell you guys about to make sure that you do them. Make sure you don't cheap out on your products. As we'll talk about here in a second, I did not go cheap on any of the products I use for the painting, such as the primer, the body filler, the paint, or the clear coat. So those are some of the little things that I learned through this process. Let's go look at all the equipment that I used as well as the products I used and talk about how much each of them costs. Alright, as I go over some of the equipment and the products that I used, I want you guys to comment below if you've had any experience with the stuff I used, or if you can make suggestions on other equipment that may fit a good budget as well that works really well as well. So let's help out anyone on here who may be taking on this project so they can do it right and use good equipment but not have to break the bank. So I get a lot of questions about my air compressor. I borrowed this air compressor from my neighbor, and you can see the specs on it here. And this worked really well. It handled every step of the way just fine. The primer, the paint, the clear coat, whatever it was, it did just fine. My paint gun was a Harbor Freight paint gun. It wasn't the cheapest one. It was the $75 range, which is kind of their mid-range one. And I think it did really well as well. If you watch the videos, you know I had kind of an issue with the hopper for the paint, kind of clogging up the vent. But once I figured that out, the gun just performed really well. Now I'm going to throw just some video on the screen of all the products I used and the prices I used. At the end, we'll tally everything up and see what the total was. So I hope some of this information helps at least one of my viewers. I'm not sharing this to say that I did everything right or that this is the exact way to go, but I want you to be able to learn from my mistakes and from my successes as well. Remember, if you have any comments or questions, comment below. Let's help each other out. I want everyone to be successful, and I want everyone to be able to learn as we go. Thanks for watching the video. Thanks for your support. Subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you guys in the next video.